Be the church. Hey, Mitchell Berean. Welcome to the second week of our fall campaign. We're looking at the second cylinder in the engine that powers the church. Remember that we're trying to discover who we're supposed to be as a church. The church was created on purpose for a purpose, and that purpose is to accomplish the mission of God. And so we see that Jesus initiated the church. It's God's design, and it really is intended to advance that mission. And the mission is a rescue mission to save the world, the people around us, to make sure that everybody has a chance to hear the gospel. And in the meantime, God has created this engine in the church that is powerful. It's able to move that mission forward, and it really has over the 2,000 years of the church's history since Jesus started it. And one of the most encouraging things is where Jesus says, I'm going to build my church and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. In other words, it will continue to advance until the mission is done and Jesus comes back. And so we want to look at this engine. And last week we looked at the cylinder of worship. This week we look at the second cylinder, and that is called discipleship. It's also a good word for this cylinder is followers. Remember, we're not interested as a church in just being Christians. Christians are people that are identified as Christ ones. It's a good term, but we really want to be known as followers of Jesus. And that puts a little more action to it. It defines a little better for us. The word Christian is known in our culture as just somebody that kind of claims, maybe they go to church every once in a while and they claim to be connected to Jesus. But followers are people that are engaged. And so we want to look at the statement of purpose we have for this cylinder. Goes this way. Answering the call of Jesus to leave all, we chase after him with reckless abandon. It's important that we understand that Jesus has called us to leave everything and to follow him. The key verses that we have, the key verses are found in Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 2, which we'll look at in a minute, and then Luke chapter 9, verse 23. Matthew's gospel, Mark's gospel, and Luke's gospel all have this interaction with Jesus and this call of Jesus. In our process of discipleship, our vision for discipleship, we looked at last year the 4 chairs of discipleship. The second chair is to become a follower of Jesus. And this is our key verse. Luke 9:23 says this, "Then he said to the crowd," this is Jesus speaking, "If any of you wants to be my follower, you must give up your own way, take up your cross daily, and follow me." Jesus makes a radical call on our lives, and he makes this call to everyone. The call is to follow him, to become a follower, and that involves some things. It involves leaving our past, leaving an old life where we were self-directed, where we did what we wanted. And he says you must leave that. You've got to leave that behind, and so you've got to deny yourself. And that means primarily to give up a life of self-interest and self-fulfillment. The realization that this life is not found in the pursuit of what I want. But Jesus really says to be his follower, you've got to give that up. And so it's a life of self-denial in that I'm not going after what I want in life. And so I've got to leave that behind. And it's really a daily decision that I make to leave the past behind, to leave what I want to accomplish, the things that I'm after. I'm leaving those behind. In one of the illustrations of the Christ-centered life, or of the life in Christ, found in the 4 spiritual laws, there's a circle drawn that represents your life. And in the middle of your life, there's a throne. And the question is posed, who is on the throne of your life? Who's making the decisions? Are you on the throne in your life? Or would you be willing to get off that throne and to allow Jesus to be on it? And so give up your own way is the first piece of this verse. The second piece, take up your cross daily. That's a daily decision to embrace God's plan for your life. So I'm getting off the throne of my life and I'm allowing God to begin to direct me. Jesus took up the cross, and for him, the cross represented the mission of God. That was God's plan for him, that he had come to earth on mission. Just like you and I are to live on mission, God has a purpose and a plan for us. He has things he wants us to accomplish, both individually and as a church. And so we've got to come to this place where we deny our self-interest, our own agenda, and we take up the agenda of God. That's what the cross represents. For Jesus, it was a path of suffering. It was a path of sacrifice in payment for the sin of the world. And so he died to provide that payment. This was God's mission for him. Are we as a church walking in alignment with God so that we can seek his plan for us? What is God's agenda? What is his direction for us? You know, the Bible's full of wisdom. It is also full of some specific directives, but the Bible really contains a lot of wisdom. When we seek God's direction as a church, really what we're looking for is, what is God doing? What is he up to in us and around us? What's the direction that he would want us to go? And we put ourselves in a posture where we don't go after the things we want, right? As a church, we're looking for, what does Jesus want? What is God's direction for us? And so we deny ourselves, we take up our cross. That is the plan of God, the mission of God for us. And then lastly, Jesus says, follow me. And so Jesus, being the head of the church, is going to give us direction. He's going to lead us into the ability to make those decisions. What we need is the wisdom of God. In Romans 12, 1 and 2, listen to this. It's one of the key passages for this purpose. It says this, and so, dear brothers and sisters, I plead with you to give your bodies to God because of all he's done for you. Let them be a living and holy sacrifice, the kind he will find acceptable. This is truly the way to worship him. Last week we focused on worship. We used this passage for worship as well. Here, the second verse is what I want us to key on for this week. Don't copy the behavior and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect. As a church, we need to know God's will for us. We need to ask the question, and we need to allow God to take us through that transformation of thinking, even as a church, so that we are looking at the world around us, we're looking at our church, we're recognizing what is God's will for us. This requires wisdom. And so we want to acquire that wisdom. We want to take on the will of God, the mind of God as a church. That's how we're firing on this cylinder, is when you and I are putting aside our own agenda as a church. We're not spiritual consumers, just looking to consume what we need, okay? There's a place for that, but we want to move to the place as a church where we're following Jesus into the next step. And so we move to a place where we're really willing to deny ourselves. We're taking up our cross as a church. What is God's plan? What's his will for us? And we're following Jesus in that direction. This is what it means to fire on this cylinder, to be a group of people who are followers of Jesus. I want to encourage you as you go through this life group lesson, you ask those questions, discuss as a group, and then even carrying it into the rest of this week for you individually, to consider what are you doing as a disciple? Where are you at? Are you contributing to being a church filled with disciples of Jesus? That's what's going to make the engine that powers the church here at Mitchell Berean firing and working and pulling us forward and pushing us into the future. And so I encourage you to consider this cylinder of discipleship. Again, where are we as a church? Where are you as an individual? God bless you as you look at this and as you study the rest of this lesson. I know that God's going to move you forward as a disciple following him, and that's going to mean we move forward as a church. God bless you. Enjoy your time together. We'll see you next week.